for Strategic Affairs monthly distinguished lecture series. Today is Saturday, August 22nd, 2026. It is 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in United States, and it is 7:30 p.m. in India. Those of you who registered probably saw this flyer while registering. The topic of today's distinguished lecture is, are the regional wars escalating into World War III? And our distinguished speaker is Lieutenant General retired Rakesh Sharma, PhD. Actually, he has written on this topic already, so we can't have more thorough domain expert on this particular topic than Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma. A little bit about Council for Strategic Affairs. CSA imparts education in the field of international relations. Council fosters discussion, dialogue, and debate on geopolitical issues. We encourage strategic studies in general to raise the level of awareness. CSA condemns terrorism in all forms worldwide. Council aims to contribute towards world peace and prosperity. CSA promotes people-to-people contact and track to diplomacy. We encourage everyone to subscribe, like, and share our YouTube channel. CSA is registered as a 501c3 organization with the IRS in United States. We do have a monthly roundtable discussion on second Saturday of each month at 10 a.m. A monthly guest lecture by a domain expert on fourth Saturday of each month, just like we are having today. There's a fellowship training program for college students. And again, we are registered as a 501c3 organization. So Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, PhD, was commissioned into Gorkha Rifles in 1977. He spent almost 40 years in Indian Army. He has extensive operational experience in Jammu Kashmir, Northeast, etc. He has also trained the Botswana Army for 3 years in Africa and trained War College at Abuja, Nigeria. He has a PhD in defense studies. He was also a research fellow at IDSA, which is called Manohar Parrikar Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis now. He has been heavily decorated and awarded. He has been a regular participant in seminars, lectures, various institutions, TV, newspaper, all those things. He is a distinguished fellow at the Vivekananda International Foundation and also at the CLAWS Center for Land Warfare Studies. He is also on the Executive Council of Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis and GCTC, which is Global Counter-Terrorism Council. I'm very pleased to say that he has been on our platform several times, and we hope that he'll continue to grace our platform with future engagements also. So talking about regional wars escalating into World War III, there are two hot wars going on, one in the European theater in which participants are Russian Federation, Ukraine, surprisingly North Korea, which sent its troops, and of course the elephant in the room is USA, NATO, and EU. And then there's West Asia theater, which involves United States, Israel, Iran, Lebanon. And if we see, there are 9 other countries that have US bases that have got secondarily involved. So are we just talking about regional wars? And this is the question our distinguished speaker will address today in his lecture. So this gives you a map of Russia-Ukraine war. On August 20th, it was 1,639 days. And this map depicts, where is the, who occupies what. But there are more issues going on. Some weapons or missiles have been fired at Poland. There are issues about whether Russia is involved or not. There are, drone warfares in, Black Sea and in Caspian Sea, etc., etc. So it's kind of getting enlarged. And this gives you the map of West Asia. So where are the players, Iran and Saudi Arabia, Iraq. And this is Bab al-Mandeb, which is getting involved with involvement of Houthis from Yemen. And this is the Strait of Hormuz. And of course, again, a much better map of Bab al-Mandeb. So I am not going to say much, but the impression one is gathering that war is extending. There are some housekeeping rules. We want everyone to mute themselves and don't interrupt the esteemed speaker. There'll be question and answers moderated through chat room later on once the lecture is over. So without further ado, it is my pleasure and honor to invite Lieutenant General retired Rakesh Sharma, PhD, to deliver this distinguished lecture. So, sir, the platform is yours. You can take your time.
Uh, Thank you, Dr. Adityanjee, for inviting me. It's a great honor for me to be again on your show. It is a show that I watch intently and regularly. So there is much to learn from your show, from your events that you conduct regularly, and I am a avid watcher. So I'm pleasure for inviting me, and it's an honor. And now, I have written an article on the issue largely relating to the convergence of these two larger wars. But beyond it, if we see what are the organizations who study wars all over the world are saying, there are 51 different types of wars on. If you read the Quincy or many other institutes, the 6, 7 major institutes who study war, and we might say that the civil wars which are on in Sahel region or in Latin America or in say Myanmar and many other countries cannot be combined together to call it to a war. But the number of casualties being carried out, and which we read in Somalia and South Sudan and many other countries, well, actually it gives rise to a feeling that while we may bucket them into what we call it civil wars, then there are significant civil wars on all over the world. And world is not so much paying attention to the civil war. So there is one part of the story which is the civil wars, which are tremendous. Many of these countries, you can't even say who is governing them, or at least portions of their country are ungovernable or not being governed at all. So there are issues about civil wars which are spreading and which are expanding, and there are issues that need to take care of. So that's civil wars. And then there are interstate wars, these two major wars that you have rightly referred to, the one fought between Ukraine and Russia, and of course the one between Israel, United States, and Iran. Now, there are other small wars. Actually, we can debate like what's happening in the Durand line between Pakistan and Afghanistan. When they keep firing and fighting at each other, it's not a war that comes into so much of news because there are major wars on. But then there is a standard issue on where even Pakistanis have used aircrafts to bombard very many places deep inside Afghanistan in the garb of saying we are trying to hit terrorist camps. So there is a imbroglio in the Afghanistan Pakistan side. So those are additional wars. Now, if you consider both these wars, and you have rightly mentioned the number of days that have been fought, in the Ukraine Russia war, well, it was fought into very many ways, starting from 2022 when it started. But in 2022, it was supported by the West. The Ukraine was supported by the West. But after first 40, 45 days when the war started, there was a total transshipment into the thought process of the war. Because, rightly initially, the Russians thought that they could be easy walk through, and the public and the population, Russian-speaking population of areas north of Dnipro will rise up and support Russians. But within 40 days of the war starting, that very thought process of how the war was planned initially, coming from Sumy or Charkiv or towards Kharkiv or Kiev, coming through Belarus, all that finished in 40 days. The whole war and its forces withdrew back because that war was not successful. So the end state planned right at the beginning by the Russians went away in the month of April, and it took a step backwards. So, a step backwards, the 2,000 kilometers of frontage that was initially shown in the beginning of March actually constricted itself to about 100,000 odd kilometers up to Crimea, and it related to establishment of a land bridge across to Crimea, and also capture of these four oblasts on the eastern side of Ukraine. Now, all these years, if you follow the war that has been going on, there has been excellent support, and there is much to learn about the innovation that the Ukrainians have shown. Last year, in 2025, the Ukrainians fired actually targeted more than 800,000 drones, and they were all targeted. And it was actually hitting. And you see, 90% of the casualties that the Russians have come from the drones and the industry. It's not a question of having simple drones. The dynamism of the Ukrainian drone industry is something worth seeing. We talk about loitering, they have gone to lurking drones, which are lying on the ground as if inert, and suddenly takes up when it sees a target. So the transformation of that war. So after 15th of June this year, the war changed colors again. After 15th of June, this war changed colors, and the Ukrainians decided to target now infrastructure. So infrastructure up to 2,000 kilometers deep into Russia. It's a very large country, and the depth has gone up so much that Moscow was hit, and petroleum plants, refineries, and pipelines, and so the changeover which happened after 15th of June also showed the changeover that happened between by the Russians, where the targeting became more focused towards Kiev and towards Kharkiv or towards Dnipro or Odessa. And there was drones, as you mentioned, which have crossed toward to Poland. So there's a transformation in last 2 months as to the character of the war being fought between Russia and Ukraine. So, and with now about 20% of their territory, which is in the hands of Ukrainian territory in the hands of Russians, the targeting has become of the Ukrainians is of a quality that the land bridge that connects Crimea has been hit. Is called a highway of death. And the transportation, which is logistic supply to Crimea and to the Oblast of Kherson, etc., has become so difficult for Russians. And similarly, all the Russian, the small ports and the ships that were located in Azov Sea and the Black Sea have been hit by seaside drones. So, entire Crimea Peninsula, which has been on in the news for a very long time, 10, 12 years, is now in a focus because to resupply Crimea has become difficult. So the level of war in the course of last 2 months has escalated to a different level, and the casualties being caused are too much. Though the border is not shifting tremendously, it is very minor changes, which is in the line between them. Though 30 odd kilometers on both sides where the troops are deployed is actually a kill zone, kind of kill zone. So nobody can move. It's so difficult a war. And so here I see that there is an old war being fought, an old war of the First World War type, and a new war being fought with the latest of weaponry being carried out, partly brought it from the Russians. But one fact here is that there is no air interceptors left for Ukraine. So they are suffering because the interception has become a difficult phenomenon. I come to the other part of the second war. Now, we can't actually detach as what happened between Israel and Gaza and what is continuing between Israel and Gaza. Now, Israel is constructing a wall, a kind of a high wall to split Gaza into two. And the so-called yellow line, they used to say. So there is Gaza, which is now pushed more towards the sea, and the rest of the areas taken over by Israel is also the areas south of Litani River in Lebanon. So the whole character of Middle East is changing. And then you also add a Middle East, I'm saying the area of Israel and Palestine changing. Add to it is what is happening on the West Bank, where there are various issues happening in various settlements, and the settlements are increasing. So there is a distinct plan unfolding across between Lebanon, and of course Israel is also hitting Syria. So there is a mixture there. But I see the war between Iran and US as a great learning experience. On the first day itself, on 28th of February, the United States targeted in 900 targets. In fact, the 900 targets won, and the 13th of March, where 90 targets were selected on Kharag Islands. It is a learning process to say how these targets were selected through AI means and through best of technology, and how these targets were the areas were targeted across. Precise targeting, superbly executed operations. On 13th of March, where Kharg Island was targeted, all the 90 sites were not one fuel infrastructure were hit on Kharg Islands. It was all military targets. So precisely selected on a small island and hit. So what the United States has done is actually devastation in Iran. People say ad hoc about 23,000 targets were hit in Iran. There has been devastation. Some estimates says Iran requires $350 billion. Some say $400 billion to come out of this eventually when they start reconstructing. So the devastation being carried out into Iran is tremendous. But you take a step back, the underdog countries have always shown that they plan their kind of warfare differently. So if we go back to history of some time, the Viet Cong fought differently with the United States, and when Vietnam fought a war. Similarly, the Mujahideen fighting USSR in the 80s, or the Taliban fighting the Americans in Afghanistan subsequently. These are countries who are not known for that kind of military prowess, but and fighting the best of military powers. And in each one of these cases, if you see, the underdogs performed quite well. The United States had to go out of Vietnam. They had to get out of Afghanistan. The USSR moved away of Afghanistan. So you see the kind of warfare that has been fought. The countries which are asymmetrically weaker actually plan their warfare typically in mindful of the fact that the stronger country, the great power, will bring about great amount of devastation, and that devastation they will have no answer to it. So these countries, maybe Vietnam, or for that matter Afghanistan, and of course now Iran or Ukraine, have actually planned their warfare in a manner that they will be able to respond in their own way in a asymmetric kind of warfare. There is where Iran knew that they had no reply to the kind of devastation that the United States will bring to bear when they enter the war and join up with Israel. So they planned differently. They knew that they had to have weaponry for which they could protect themselves in a manner. So they planned in targeting the Middle East, such as 18, 19 US bases all over the place, the radar system, the command and control facilities, the ports infrastructure in the Gulf area, and took advantage of the geography of Straits of Hormuz to actually show that the victory or winning, as it has been stated, would not have been so easy for the United States. So the response of Iran was not to take on the fight to United States and to their ships, to the armadas, and to all the others, but the response of the Iranians were to take the weak points, which is the issue of asymmetric warfare. You have to learn which are the weaknesses of the adversary, and hit the weaknesses and not the strong points. And that's what Iran tried to do, despite decimation of its entire hierarchy, right from supreme leader to everybody else. They anticipated all this would happen and they planned for it. This is kind of asymmetric warfare, which is advantageous, and which many countries have taken advantage of in history. And that's what Iranians did, and they have been actually able to push back. Now today time is that the United States has got paucity, in fact, and they say only about 800 odd Patriot missile, which is the most significant missile, about 800 odd left out of the 2,500 Patriots that they had. And to get interceptors produced in an industrial case is also difficult. So here we come to these two wars which were being fought kind of separately. United States was supporting Ukraine, but it was not directly involved. In the course of last 1 month, there has been kind of overlap here. So after the Houthis opened up the front on the Red Sea side, denied the Bab el Mandeb, and denied the port which Yanbu, which the Saudis were using for transporting about 5 million barrels per day, the pipelines across the desert to Yanbu port and the refinery base near Yanbu. When they targeted this, the war shifted and involved Saudi Arabia in this big way. And there were number of hits carried out by various drones which were hitting the airports inside Saudi Arabia. So there was Saudi Arabia got willy-nilly involved because their alternative supply routes that they had outside the Gulf towards Red Sea have also been now targeted by the Houthis. That spread the thing here. And thereafter, the United States and the Saudis decided to hit the Popular Mobilization Front of Iraq, which is a Iran-supported force, and there were 7-8 different targets inside Iran were hit. So Saudi Arabia willy-nilly got involved in targeting 7 to 8 places in Saudi Arabia, where the PMF was deployed, and PMF has got Iran support. So they entered into this war. Simultaneously, Ukraine opened up and targeted the areas of 2, 3 ships in the Caspian Sea. Now, Caspian Sea has been utilized by Iran to supply Shahid drones, etc., into Russia. But this is actually opening up and targeting two wars which are fought separately. There was now a tie-up in Caspian Sea with Ukraine firing at Iran, and Iran threatening that we will target Ukraine. Now both wars were kind of converging together if this thing had pursued further. Similarly, Egypt was hit. When Egypt, 2 of its ships, including one of the United States tankers in Egypt, were hit. That also added on to this one. And of course, the ships in the Gulf which are being hit. Now, to say that all these drones are coming from A country or B country is very difficult to predict until somebody owns up. Because what happens is that there are false flag operations. You hit a ship anywhere else and say, look, I didn't do it. And nobody owns up. But then somebody is hitting those ships across there and tying up other countries, involving many more people, so many more countries. So there is a kind of interconnectedness that has been developing over a period of time, despite the paucity of resources that Ukraine has in the form of interceptors, or the United States not able to produce more interceptors. This being industrial wars now, a kind of industrial wars, there is a paucity of resource available. So these two wars are not exactly interconnected, but then you can't even say that they're totally diverse from each other. I come back to my last point out here. Do we call it a world war? Now we say World Wars One and World War Two and World War One. We say great powers are fighting wars, and there are massive number of casualties, and there are larger countries. The whole world is involved. There are economic repercussions globally in the World War, especially the Second World War. Second World War, though, started on 1st of September. Many people have announced it 11th of September or something, when the British and the French joined. And some people say actually World War II started when Pearl Harbor happened. And it was in between, it was the Europeans fighting a war and it was not a world war. Or when Japan entered into it, it became World War. Those are historians subsequently researching issues and finding answers to it. Today, uh, we can't call it a world war. Both superpowers, or at least China is not involved at all. Both superpowers are fighting separate wars. And maybe there is an external support to Ukraine by the United States, but it's not direct involvement. So, there are issues here, but economically the whole world is in pain. There is great amount of anxiety worldwide happening because of the pain being caused by the Gulf, as also the pain being caused by Ukraine was a granary of wheat producing and many other issues here. Now, to add to it, if the United States moves out or takes a step back away from the Gulf, which is very, very, very likely. Now, to say that they would spend billions of dollars to resurrect all these bases that have been destroyed or semi-destroyed is actually pumping in more money into the Gulf areas is not so simple. And so, therefore, if the United States takes a step back, there will be a great void on the security that the United States are providing over last 4 or 5 decades to the Gulf area, which makes the Gulf countries susceptible to more clashes and more wars in the future and start planning on their own subsistence, which makes the whole issue even more problematic geopolitically in this area. So I would say that let us allow the historians after 2 years, after 10 years to say, no, both the wars started, all this was a global war, and the global war, we call it world war, started on 24th of February when the Russians attacked, or 7th of October when the Hamas attacked Israelis, or 28th of February when the United States attacked, or when you all put them together, there was a global war on, there was a global economic crisis on, there were millions of people who died, and yes, this was a world war. Today, it is not being termed as a World War III. So I think we will build on these issues as we discuss later.
Thank you very much indeed, Lieutenant General Sharma, for very educational lecture, and I perfectly agree with what you said in your presentation. There are a couple of comments I want to make before I bring in questions from the audience and possibly some comments from the audience. You mentioned about, how United States, used AI to very precisely choose the targets. We should not forget 168 elementary school girls killed by United States in Minab. That tells you how precisely these targets were. So that is one comment. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, so now we are had-beens in the world. No, no, we are this side of the hill, and AI is a thing which we are learning hard way. So even now, when you start working on AI, the AI tells you itself, look, AI can do mistakes. So the AI itself tells you that I can do mistakes, and it is because some data which has been collated and trained to put across some answers. Why did the United States do so in hitting the girls' school, which brought a great defame to it? They could say, there was a military establishment, the IRGC establishment, not very far away, which was to be targeted. Now, that's not very believable because the tomahawks were so precise that they reached here. It means that there is some kind of a fault into the AI systems, which actually judgmentally brought about the targeting system, and they targeted all that. So if you say that they had launched 900 missiles on day one, or of various types into this area, and one of them actually caused grave damage across to civilian population, that is 165 schoolgirls. Well, their AI was fairly good quality, and their targeting was done precisely and well done. So when we see each of the targets and you study it subsequently, I think there was an immense amount of focus being carried out on the targeting being done by the United States on day one. 165 girls in the girls' school was a grave mistake, and such mistakes will happen. And they would happen. It was a wrong thing to do, but it did happen. And therefore, there are always glitches. So when we say that everything is precise and precision, every precision, is not so precise. I will just like to add that if you say any country has got the best air defense possible, then Israel has got the best air defense. So there are four layers of it: David slings, Patriot system, edges also. They have, and all these four, despite the four layers, and despite being prepared for everything else, the Iranian missiles and drones have been able to pierce through these four layers and actually hit many places, Haifa refinery, Tel Aviv, and so many places. So to say that you can have the best of systems possible and they'll be infallible is not right. There will be fallibility. There will be possibility of some things going wrong where you are hit and damaged. So I think there was a fallibility on part of the United States in that manner. And I think there was a lack of anticipation on part of the United States on a prolonged war. They thought that the war may finish off, like the Russians thought in Ukraine, the war will finish off in short while. That, anybody says that I have escalation control or escalation dominance, I think that needs to be challenged also. You may not have escalation dominance. You don't know how wars have got life of their own. They proceeded. So to answer your question, I think there was a fallibility on part of United States in that judgmental issue of these 165 girls who were killed.
My second question slash comment is just you discussed about the Iranian asymmetric response and asymmetric response in other wars, in other theaters. Could you enlighten our audience a little bit about what has been dubbed as the mosaic doctrine that IRGC adopted? Because I think that is something that they had planned very well in advance, the mosaic doctrine.
So to put it very simply, see, many terminologies come out from the West and they are lapped up and used anywhere else. Till 2015, there was no gray zone. Now everybody talks about gray zone. So I'm just saying this is one mosaic warfare is a terminology. Suffice it to say that the Iranians knew, and if you remember last year June, the United States had brought those V2 bombers and they have bombed, the Nandans and the other two sites across there using the biggest of 30,000 pound bombs. The Iranians knew for a very long time when the might of the power of the United States is brought to bear on them, it will be well nigh impossible for any kind of interception of these very powerful missiles that will be brought to bear, along with the cyber attacks and the electronic warfare that will be brought to bear on Iran. So the country understood. Now, any country who understands that we can't do this has to think on its own self what is the measures of resilience and what is the measure of survivability that we need to create. Now, to plan the resilience and survivability, they'll have to cater for a situation where the resilience itself will face, and then thereafter how to respond will become even more difficult. The Iranians planned for this. They knew that a time, because we have seen there have been selected killings across over various periods of time of various people in Iran. So they knew that there will be leakage of information or in some form of electronic intelligence or event, and they would be targeting in a manner that the command and control structure will fail and the command and control people would be destroyed. Now, the planning, actually it is exercise in learning. When you say that 40 odd people, the entire hierarchy was destroyed on the first morning itself, and still for now 5 months Iran has survived because the alternatives were so seamless. So the system of command and control was so decentralized across to IRGC units and to the Iranian army units all over the country with detailed orders as to what they will need to do. without resorting back to communication channels to take, okay, can I do this? Or if the top mans are killed, the next man or the next to next or next to next, the third or the fourth or the fifth down in the rung comes and occupies that chair. The planning was done in this kind of detail, appreciating that the power of the United States will be so tremendous against them. So they created that mosaic profile for the entire length of the war. They disaggregated the combat units. They disaggregated the hierarchical structure, and they knew who will come and occupy which chair and how will he execute subsequently. I think it's an exercise in learning as time will follow as to how they unveiled the mosaic warfare and they fought the mosaic warfare, planning for it. And even now, if you say, with the best of battlefield transparency available with the Western countries, United States, these plethora of satellites available, plethora of drones, high-level drones, low-level drones. The whole area is saturated with information being flown, automatically networked, automatically placed for quick decision making. Iran is still able to bring out from one of the subterranean areas and take out a missile launcher and fire a missile and target, say, Kuwait or Jordan or anywhere else, and then take that big vehicle which fires a missile back into safeguarding areas, or take out a drone and fire it across there. So they planned this resilience that we will be targeted, the adversary, the United States will be able to see everything, and everything that is visible will be hit. Today is this warfare. Anything that is visible will be hit. And so they knew everything is visible. So they planned a subterranean warfare as part of this mosaic that they created, where even now, after 5 months of such excessive bombing that they have faced, they are able to still target these American bases and even sometimes Israel. So that is what I should state about the mosaic warfare.
I'm going to sort of, involve some other people in this discussion. We have Brigadier Arun Sehgal in the audience. He is also a member of our International Advisory Board. So I'm going to invite Brigadier Arun Sehgal to give his comments and maybe pose a question to you, Lieutenant General Sharma. Brigadier
So
Sehgal, please.
Brigadier Sahgal is my guru, sir, and I have learned so much from him. So I would much like to learn from him than to answer his question, sir.
Okay. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Yes,
you.
sir. Yes, yes,
Do
sir.
you want to
Okay.
put your camera on, Brigadier Sehgal?
No, yeah, better not.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Okay. See, excellent presentation. I mean, General Sharma is one of our foremost analysts in the country, and he always exceptionally good. But I have a different perspective about these wars. I think what is happening is there is a perception emerging. Uh, you cannot win standoff wars against any adversary. See, happen to, and also it is among fact is that it is very difficult for an outside power to go and occupy somebody else's territory and hold it for long. And territorial occupation is also becoming a passe. I'll give you an example. Look, what we are in the fifth year of the Ukraine war. Look at the way the Ukrainians are now responding. Russia is feeling the pinch. They have shortage of, I mean, which we are sending it to them. So the point is that the Ukrainians are suddenly getting an upper hand in this war vis-a-vis the Russians, and this is happening out on the fifth year. So Russians have not been able to capture both of the provinces that they wanted to capture. Kiev is outside there, and on the top of that, they are suffering huge economic, political, and military losses. Let's look at the United States. Application of power, try to destroy his nuclear facilities. Nothing happened. He and which the general very rightly. So the question that comes about is the same thing that happened in Afghanistan, etc. And now we also seeing the Chinese posturing vis-a-vis Taiwan and trying to think that they will go and capture Taiwan. So the question that I have is territorial conquest is the concept, is the end game of the war, or why are the wars being waged in the first place when they are being not giving the kind of strategic results that we are looking for? I mean, that's an important issue. Why are you waging a war? I mean, in my country, we are having an issue today discussing kind of air power, kind of naval power, kind of power, and we realize that there is Op Sindoor. 44, 88 hours later, we called it off. Indian and Pakistan is a little smarter that way. We don't, Uh, but the question is, there are nuclear powers, there are non-nuclear powers, and yet the issue that is emerging is wars are not giving the strategic advantage. And in fact, what has happened in the Middle East today is that the whole area is in turmoil. There is a practical strategic imbalance over there, rightly put across. The United States has lost its resilience, and we are now going back into sort of a, the old age of where the Shia Sunni fight going to go about areas about fighting about energy resources, etc. Coming, and the world is going to be suffering. So the question, and above all, the biggest casualty in this whole issue is the so-called rule-based order. Simply speaking, there is simply no rule-based order in the global system. So my point is, why are it's a point for reflection. Why are we fighting war? And what are the gains out of these wars when we are not seeing any viable gains at all? That's all I have to say, sir.
General Sharma.
So as always, Brigadier Sehgal traps it's a he has actually raised the most important issue that also creates anxiety in us. Of course, we are had-beens, we are veterans, so we are a step outside from the actual establishment. The point, I absolutely agree with what Brigadier Sehgal is saying. The point is, sir, what is victory today? What is winning? Now, if we can't decide, now the point out here is that when we talk about victory in India, we say we go back to 1971 war. We say okay, capture of territory, prisoner of war, destruction of wherewithal, or regime change. Those metrics that decided victory are no more relevant in 2026 in this part of the century, because as rightly pointed out, territory is not the answer. The 20% territory that Russia is occupying of Ukraine does not imply that there is any victory or winning as far as Russia is concerned, because when Ukraine is able to target ad lib any areas in Russia that they wish to do so. And you say that is there victory here? There is. And you can't even sustain the areas you have captured, because the areas you have captured is that highway of death denies it here. So there is one very major issue is that firstly we have to define what is war. That war definition which Clausewitz laid down in 1815 may not be so relevant today. Present generation has to say that what is war? Can a country be subjugated by only using cyber war? Can we use cyber? And we say India had a major cyber attack which pushed off all our electricity, and the northern grid went off, or the Bombay went off. The war by itself can manifest into hundreds of ways. So that war where it will be only violent and it will be within interstate is also questionable. So one is war, second is victory. The point I wish to rate, and I leave the United States apart and the Russians apart. We are a country which is developing ourselves and modernizing military forces. I'm not even saying transforming, but we are modernizing it. We need to decide what is the outcome we want in the next conflagration of Sindhu 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, or whatever we are going to do. What is the outcomes we want? We decide the outcome. That outcome is not victory. It is not winning. It is not standoff attacks. Because standoff attacks, Kosovo, Libya, Iraq, Syria, Vietnam, Afghanistan, all standoff attacks did not imply that there was victory or winning or peace subsequent to it. So, standoff attacks are devastating in nature, but they do not lead to any strategic advantage, right word used by Brigadier Sehgal. So I say that for us, a soldier who has to plan transformation of forces, his armed forces, must be told that this is the outcome we want. And that outcomes dictate what kind of military capabilities a nation must have. And that military capability is specific to a time and specific to a task being performed. And that military capability actually disaggregates itself to some tanks, some APCs, some satellites. So, that it is basically a question of outcomes. Now, that outcome has to be set by the political hierarchy. Finally, President Trump would have said, okay, this is the outcome I want, regime change. Now, nearly regime change happened in Iran, but that does not mean that there was cessation of hostilities and there was strategic advantage. It didn't turn out to be strategic advantage. So the outcome is an issue, and that becomes a problematic issue. We cannot win a war, but we must, on the termination of the war, have some strategic advantage, some pluses that we can count on, saying that we have achieved something. Have we created a deterrent capability which was absolutely visible for other country to hereafter not take a chance tomorrow? It can't be said to be true. So this is a drawing board, and I think the issues raised by Brigadier Sehgal require a deep thought, and it can't be answered today. I would say that there we need to know the outcomes even before we venture towards the war, and that will tell us what are we going to fight for, and that. And I'll end by saying that the rules-based order was actually lumped on us from 1945 onwards, and many nations were enjoying the fruits of rules-based order, were very happy. The Gulf was enjoying itself. The Europe was having a great time subsisting under the rules-based order that was there. Finally, a time had to come when the guarantors of rule-based orders would pull their hands back and said, sorry, yeah, we can't afford to give you rules-based order while you are not contributing themselves backward. So the rules-based order was going away for quite some time. It's not just vanished in one day. It took us some time to go away. And today the time has come that it is jiski lathi uski bhais. You have to be strong. People say soft power. I say today, this is an era of authoritarian conflict resolution. You ought to have the authority to resolve a conflict. And if you have to have it, it's an era of hard power. And therefore, let's not bank on rules-based order. We bank on how we're going to achieve the outcomes that a political hierarchy wants us to achieve.
Thank you, Lieutenant General Sharma. I'm going to invite another member from the audience who can give a diplomatic perspective, and that is Ambassador Pradeep Kamoor. He also serves on our International Advisory Board. So, Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, if you are okay, please give your comments, or maybe if you have a question for Lieutenant General Sharma, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adityanjee. Always a pleasure to participate in the CSA events. And thanks again to General Rakesh Sharma for coming on our channel and giving such a brilliant and very lucid, analysis. Absolutely useful and absolutely interesting. Incidentally, one of your friends is here in town, whom I met a couple of days back, General KJS Dhillon, Tiny Dhillon.
Yes, I know him well, sir.
Yeah, yeah. So he's been giving some talks in Washington D.C. area.
Yes,
We
yes.
hope that you also come and we can help organize some of these talks. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
He's,
To be
he- he's
honest.
going to he's going to give another talk in a couple of hours from now.
Yes.
Now, very interesting to learn about the new scenarios of wars which are happening all over the world. So, what I want to understand from you, General Sharma, is what are the changes which have happened and what will it take now for it to really be declared as a world war? What will be the additionalities? In the sense that already there are so many little configurations and wars all over the place. So, what are the new paradigms? What is the new research? What are the new writings in this field? Does it have to be a total sort of breakdown of communication between China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and some of the other countries on the one side, and USA and West Europe and Australia and New Zealand and Japan and Korea on the other side, along with some of their other partners, and Pakistan, blowing hot, blowing cold with both the sides. So what is it going to take for that sort of scenario to evolve, where it becomes more and more defined as a hot war and a hard war, not just as a all these wars which are taking place. Secondly, in terms of the India and Pakistani future, which also you mentioned and Brigadier Sehgal alluded to, uh, in the future, will Pakistan be further emboldened with this Mecca agreement between Saudi and Turkey and Pakistan? And in the sense that we already hear reports about a lot of drones and a lot of other supplies, military supplies coming in from China and Turkey to Pakistan. So, how is India prepping itself for any future such scenarios and terrorist attacks? Back to you, General Sharma.
Thank you, Mr. Kapoor. I'm honored by your question. And as
If,
always,
if I may intervene, Jan Sharma, you can take the first question. Second question, we are going to do a roundtable discussion. Actually, before this, we were discussing. So we will leave that question aside because there will be most likely a roundtable discussion on the second one.
That'll be very, very interesting.
thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
Dr. Adityanjee, for always thinking ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Now, the point I wish to raise is there a possibility of a conflagration that spreads across to East Asia? That becomes a very critical issue. Somebody was posing the other day that now that the United States is so well occupied elsewhere and Russia is the opportunity right for Taiwan to be taken in? And the American writings and the American they used to say 2027 is a time when the China will take advantage and achieve that aim of Taiwan. So that becomes a very important issue in deciding, because that's a problematic situation that still subsists here. I personally am not a votary of this actually happening. I am not. I put my hand in the in and say that in my way that it is not easy to absorb Taiwan in this manner. It's a very difficult military operation, and it will require immense amount of um, you know will in part of Chinese to get to do that. I think they would much prefer that in the KMT does better in the elections and they are able to absorb Taiwan without getting involved into fighting through a choppy water sea, different difficult beaches, an island which has got a huge spine of a ridge line, and not easy. So that conflagration that spreads across to East Asia, personally, I don't foresee it. Of course, geopolitics is bugger's model. Anything can happen. That is one part. Second is that does the nation, the larger two great powers fighting today, United States and Russia, have the willpower and strength to continue this fight for long time ahead? Now, one cannot predict it, but it is possible that United States is now facing the brunt of internal distaste to this war, as also the paucity of industrial capacities to protect themselves. Loss of a single ship in United States Navy will be devastating for United States. So, and the Chinese, sorry, the Iranians have tried once or twice to throw missiles across to the Arabian Sea to target the ships. So, the with paucity of interceptors available and Iranians missiles still existing, that is a critical issue, whether the Americans will be able to hold on to this war situation and long. Can the world persist with its with lack paucity of oil and paucity of other resources that have been bound into the Gulf? No. So to say that this will expand further and involve all these countries together fighting in both these Eurasian areas, as also in the European areas, and spreading across to, say, Baltics, or spreading across to other countries in Europe, again, not foreseeable. Russia is under acute amount of pressure. You can't say that you require 40,000 troops additional from North Korea to come and fight for you. This can't continue. This is despite the fact that President Trump said, okay, I will not exercise with South Koreans. But the fact of the matter is to seek another 40,000 troops. I was told at once that Nepalese had sent Nepalese ex-soldiers, etc. 4,000 are fighting from the Russian side against Ukraine. This is not the kind of wars that give an impression of going ad lib in that manner. I'm not saying the war is going to finish off, but it is not that the quality of war, which we said First World War and Second World War, is going to persist. So I don't personally foresee a scenario of a North African campaign and a European campaign and a Pacific campaign, and where everybody put it together formed the Second World War. I don't foresee it, sir. So my short answer to you, sir, and maybe I'm um, born optimist here. So I say it because of optimism. And also soldiers hate the idea of wars because we've seen pain, in life. So I pursue that it is not going to expand beyond which is what it is expanded. However, historians tomorrow or after 5 years saying, no, this was World War III is a separate issue altogether. That's a historian's research where he brings all this together and seeing the rear view mirror actually proves to you, yes, that was World War III. And, students after 20 years will study this as World War III. That's a separate issue altogether.
Thank you very much indeed, Lieutenant General Sharma and Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor. I'm going to take a couple of questions, very selected questions from the audience that have come in the chat room. First is India-specific question from Rishika Sharma, who is concerned about how India is going to take the consequences of this war in terms of availability of critical minerals, as well as the tertiary sanctions that are being put on India for purchasing crude oil from Russia, etc., etc. Do you want to address that question, please?
So it's a very valid issue which Rishika Sharma has raised. The fact is that we have serious issues on issues of critical minerals and also of energy resources which are being denied to us. I think we are working overtime to create alternatives to the energy resources, and we have managed it. It's exceedingly well till now. Whether getting it from the Latin American countries or Venezuela or Nigeria or many other places, including from Russia, as we are continuing. So I think we have uphill tasks, but we will manage it. The critical minerals is another issue, largely dependent on China, and I think we are with about $150 billion trade rising and another 50 billion odd trade coming through the Southeast Asian countries and all other countries. We are working to make sure, because largely critical minerals are now being produced in China or brought about in China to be sold across the world. We are in this. So we are in a tough time, tough period, but I think we are managing it in now, and I think we'll be able to manage it in times to come.
There's a very interesting comment. It's not a question, but I will still read it and seek your response. And this comment is from Mr. Vijay Nilikeni. Both wars were started by autocrats. with very little input from important stakeholders. So the difficult decision processes were short circuited with guaranteed suboptimal outcomes, and that is basically humiliation for both the autocrats who started these wars. Interesting observations. What do you say about it?
So, Mr. Nilakani has raised a right issue. This is which what I was mentioning here. Till the time we decide an end game in various periods of time, after 10 days, after 1 month, after 2 months, after 1 year, and outcomes that we wish to achieve, um, one should not venture into a war. And wars have got the adversary also a vote. So what the adversary will bring about to bear is, something which is absolutely different, which has not been anticipated. Deception, but it's also a question of planning to fight an asymmetric war. An asymmetric war, you can't even imagine what the adversary will bring to bear. It will be all surprising. So both the hubris of entering into these two wars, and you mentioned the word autocrats, but there are two presidents who are people of great wisdom and great strength, and the nations which have tremendous amount of power to go ahead and and to take on without giving considerable thought to how an end game would come about it, and what steps will be taken to decide as to how to call it off. What is the escalation control? So when you go into a war without deciding, how will you control the escalation and say call it a day in after the first quarter of the century is over? I think the planning processes were severely wanting. The own hubris that I will be able to sort out and I have the power to punch in and whatever, actually that hubris doesn't work. It doesn't work because the adversary will actually vote in the war, and adversary's vote will push you away from that victory that you are dreaming. And that is the art of planning a warfare. What will the adversary do? What will do? I know what I'll do. I have the power, but I do not know what the adversary will bring to bear. So when I'm sure the stakeholders, as you mentioned, on both sides, the advisors rightly should have put on the table saying that, okay, the eventualities of escalation dominance failing or escalation control failing or deterrence failing, what can happen subsequently and how can that be handled? Those kind of contingencies and eventualities, I presume, were underworked. They underthought about it.
Thank you, Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma. Our last question for this distinguished lecture is from Professor Anup Kumar, who is Dean of School of Communications at CSU. Professor Anup Kumar, I would like you to come on record, on camera, and ask the question directly. I don't want to read it because that will lose the, essence of the question. So, Professor Anup Kumar.
Well, thank you, Adityanjee. Listening to General Sharma has been very enlightening. So, what I wanted to draw his attention to and seek his comment on, it seems Clausewitz's thesis, politics by other means, is more relevant today when countries may not want or afford to go for a full-scale war. And they rely on special military operations, political interference with deep state, and economic sanctions, all these other means they are using. Russia in Ukraine didn't want to go for a full scale war. Operation Sindoor also suggests that India has internalized this paradigm of new war. Uh, so, could you please comment on that? How strategic thinkers like you are looking again at reinterpreting Clausewitz in the contemporary context?
So I think in many ways I am not, I have contested many issues of Clausewitz when I write also, but some things are still relevant. This politics by other means is a relevant comment because finally the wars are fought in the thought process of the politicians. No, Professor, you will bear with me that it is a political hierarchy who decided that in Kargil you cannot cross the line of control.
Yes.
If you leave it to us military men who are serving, we would have said we will cut that whole area off and deny, and we would have finished the war within 15 days. But we fought the war for nearly 3 months because the politician laid down that you will not cross the line of control in their wisdom, as against the wishes of the military. I can go back to 1948 and said the politician decided you will not go and capture Muzaffarabad or Kotli or Mirpur or Bimbar. And we didn't do so. But we could have done, military could have done it. We were ready, poised for it. But the wisdom of the politician decides issue A. In Bangladesh, we decided, okay, Dhaka was not to be captured. It was an opportunity which we seized, but capture of Dhaka was not part of the initial plans. So I think the politician decides as to how the war has to be fought. Even the military strategy, if we say we did, you refer to Op Sindoor, if we said we hit so many targets, but we had a bouquet of 34 targets or something. Now, which targets will be hit is a decision that the military will recommend. The politician will say, yeah, don't touch this one. There will be effects of this target. For example, if there is a base which the Chinese are occupying for bringing loads across in Pakistan. So you can't hit a target A, or Turkey is occupying, or Turkey brought a military ship into Karachi harbor during the war. So hitting Karachi became a difficult proposition. So politics actually lays down how the wars are to be fought. Now, the fact is that all these wars which have been fought over a period of time, unfortunately, have remained open-ended. There is no war finishing. There is no answers coming out of interstate wars, because the adversary also achieved some kind of political, some kind of strategic advantage, which actually pushes the whole thought process back. Now, I would feel, sir, to answer it in my way. Of course, I'm retired 10 years ago. I think, sir, that there is a growing cleavage between the thinking processes of the political hierarchy and the military hierarchy. They are not conjoined together in one thought process in peacetime to decide as to what is the way out. Is economic sanctions the way out of resolving this imbroglio? Or a track 2 or track 1.5 to open channels of communication, the best way of doing it? That is a sagacity that the politician and the military hierarchy ought to talk together and come to an answer. And also others, which economists and everybody else. That, I think, is now a little lacking. I feel so, especially in the case of President Putin. President Putin in that time, he changed the whole war in 40 days. From 24th of February to 5th of April, in 40 days, the whole character of that war changed. He just shifted everybody out of Belarus and out of Kyiv and out of Sumy, Kharkiv, and moved everybody, because anybody who a military journal would have said, look, with the quantum of force that you have brought here, 150,000, 150,000 people over a 2,000 kilometers frontage, you will not be able to achieve anything. Any military planner will say that you require about 400,000 people over a 2,000 kilometers frontage to fight it. Who gave the order to go and spread so far and wide, coming from down south of Kherson and right up to Belarus? It is an unimaginable thought process of fighting a war. Was there a cleavage? Now only history will prove it that there were problems out here. What will the Iranians do to the war? What will the Pakistanis do to our response? What will response we give to, say, China? We will not, all this is in the era of imagination. And, this is where that it is not a political military fusion today. It's total amalgamation required for them to come to one synthesis. Is this war worth it? And will we achieve something, or there are better means of doing this task?
Thank you very
Thank you,
much
sir.
indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Lieutenant General Sharma. as we come to the end of this distinguished lecture, Council for Strategic Affairs and myself personally are very, very thankful to our distinguished speaker today. It was a wonderful lecture. For our audience, this will be available on our YouTube channel fairly soon. I am also thankful to our audience members. And finally, I'm thankful to Team CSA, Mr. Ripudaman Pachori and Rajiv Verma, who work in the background to make this happen. Special thanks to some of our distinguished audience members, Brigadier Arun Sehgal, Ambassador Kapoor, Professor Anup Kumar, who also gave their perspective. So thank you very much indeed to all of you.
Thank
And
you,
we
sir.
are ending this meeting. Thanks a lot,
Thank you, sir.
General Sharma.